It's for Sabra Minoka said John Dramani Mahama is out again with another bombshell. If you've been following this particular platform, you do realize we had a conversation with one man now Ofi Burkina Faso. We're talking about the history and what Mahama said in regards with Ghana Burkina Faso relationship. Now, John Dramani Mahama has not shied away from blaming the Akuffo administration from straining the relationship between Burkina Faso and Ghana. Burkina Faso recently they had a coup d'etat, a new leader, Ibrahim Traore. But one of the things you have to notice is that Mahama went on rampage and said, Akuffo do not could concern America for president and American security agency said Burkina Faso a threat in the sub-Saharan region. And Namsuntino as a Burkina Faso relationship and Ghana we had with them, as you see, now, in the end of all of these things, John Dramani Mahama, he had an interview with DW TV, Dutch World TV, Germany, Mona. You beside say, okay, all the countries in the sub-Saharan region, almost all of them, they are faced with coup d'etat and military takeover. What makes Ghana different? And also, aside from that, how sure are we John Dramani Mahama coming into power is not going to aid something like a coup d'etat plot? And John Dramani Mahama didn't shy away to say ECOWAS is to be blamed for the instability in the states, in African states. Now, I was really shocked John Dramani Mahama said, but John Dramani Mahama further went on to say, yes, ECOWAS, BBC, they need to understand, with the will of people and the will of ECOWAS. Fine, coup d'etat and planning here, nobody wants, it's not the constitution. But then, if people are jubilating, the more people are saying, okay, I'm buying them why, and they want a military takeover, which means that people have been complaining for so long. But what it happened here, you guys, no matter what, even if you are suffering, you are supposed to stay in the civilian rule. And John Dramani Mahama is saying, no, he objects to that. And also, he spoke about the relationship between Ghana and Burkina Faso moving forward. They could see some or the two, DW TV, or interview by us.
Mining in forest reserves. And so, according to the Ghana Forestry Commission, 37 forest reserves that were preserved have had incursions into them.
Let's respond to that. I'm talking to you as someone who's served as the head of ECOWAS at some point.
Yeah, in my period as chair of ECOWAS, we didn't have crisis like this. In Burkina Faso, if you remember, there was the civil unrest that followed President Compaoré's attempt to extend his term in office, and the soldiers took over, if you remember. We handled it differently from the way the new crop of heads of states handled it. You always have the threat of sanctions, but you don't go ahead and implement. You keep that as a stick and a carrot in order to encourage them to agree on a transition program and eventually come back to civilian rule. And so what we did in Burkina Faso was, when that happened, as chair of ECOWAS, myself with President Macky Sall and President Yayi Boni were dispatched to ECOWAS, by ECOWAS to go and speak to the new military leaders. We spoke to them and we said, well, ECOWAS will be forced to impose sanctions if they didn't come out with a transition program. And so we called all the stakeholders, and eventually that's how come they agreed to a transition program to do a constitutional review, have a civilian president with the soldier as prime minister. So if you remember, President Kafando was elected as president, and the military leader became the prime minister. And they agreed on a transition program which prepared them for elections. And after those elections, Roch-Kabore was elected. And so I do think that we must use diplomacy to try and get them back into the fold. Coming as, should I say, a fresh leader, a new leader again, on my resurrection, I would give that face to ECOWAS to see how we can speak to our three other brotherly countries and see how we can draw them back close. They're feeling abandoned. They believe that ECOWAS is not supporting them. And I think that we must change that narrative.
Right, right. I mean, as you say, in all fairness, that's what Nigerian President Tinubu is trying to do. He said recently he's trying to use diplomacy to try to get those three countries back on track. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But are you concerned that, you know...
I'm going to support that.
Exactly, right. So is Ghana more at risk because of the instability further north, you think?
Yes, we're at risk. Yeah, if you look at all the risk assessments, yeah, Ghana is it's quite dire, and so we need to work as quickly as possible. There's an African proverb that says that when your neighbor's house is on fire, you help him to quench it. Otherwise, when it burns down his house, it will spread to your house. And so we need to give Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger all the support they need to deal with this crisis. Otherwise, it definitely would spread and come into our countries. Already, there are incursions in northern Togo. I'm sure you've heard about them. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a matter of time. And so we need to be very proactive.
Right, right. There are some reports even suggesting there's been incursions in northern part of Ghana where you're from. But I guess your whole point is that Ghana is at risk, as you say yourself, and we have to do all that we can to, you know, prevent that situation. Youth unemployment remains high, and studies suggest that it's fueling violent extremism and radicalization, especially in the north. How do you plan to tackle that?
Well, I don't think that Ghana yet has reached that stage, but it is a worry, and if we don't do the things that will create opportunities for our young people, then we can have, you know, that kind of situation on our hands. Incidentally, Ghana is a bit different in terms of the presence of the states and the better spread of development across our country than some of our neighbors. In every district in Ghana, we have electricity. In every district in Ghana, we have a portable water system. In every district, we have a local government office. We have a secondary school. We have hospitals. We have telecommunications facilities. And so people are not feeling as alienated from the state as they will feel in some other countries. There are many countries where you go, and apart from the biggest city and the second biggest city, third biggest city, there's nothing anywhere else. And so Ghana is a bit more resilient, but we cannot take that for granted. Our major hurdle is youth unemployment. If we do not grow our economy as fast as we should to give the private sector the opportunity to create jobs, then we can end up with that kind of situation. And that is why it's a matter of urgency that we stabilize the economy as quickly as possible, open Ghana for business again, invite foreign direct investment, set up the factories, expand the farms, provide incentives to farmers, provide agro-processing support so that we're able to create more opportunity for young people. And so it's an emergency that every government should deal with. And my government is a government in a hurry. We want dedicated and loyal people to occupy the positions that will roll out our program as quickly as possible.
Right. I'm going to let you go soon, Mr. President-elect, but I'm very glad you talked about not taking the situation in Ghana for granted, because even though generally compared to some other countries, you know, there's arguably enough potable water for people, and electricity generally is not a huge problem compared to most of the neighboring countries. There's still a lot to be done to make sure that many more Ghanaians, you know, have access to potable water, have constant 24/7 electricity. There's still a lot of concern. We've been talking about the issue of galamsey for a while. You've been quite vocal about it. The galamsey, that is illegal mining for our international audience, that's polluting water bodies, and so that's further damaging the little potable water already available. What is your key plan to address galamsey?
Well, one of the major mistakes this government did was to introduce the LI that allowed mining in forest reserves. Until this government came into office, there was a ban on mining in forest reserves. And so, according to the Ghana Forestry Commission, 37 forest reserves that were preserved have had incursions into them. And you can already tell over the last 8 years, you can tell that there's something changing in the climate. The Harmattan is more severe in places that didn't used to feel the Harmattan as harshly as it did. With the agitation that took place, this government has sent an LI back to Parliament to try and reverse the situation and ban mining in forest reserves. If it is passed by Parliament before we come, then that would be a good thing. But if it isn't, we're going to go ahead and ban mining in forest reserves. And we're going to get the companies that are in the reserves to get out of the reserves. And then we're going to take action to restore those reserves. Aside from that, we're going to categorize small-scale mining better. We have just two categories, large-scale and small-scale. But with the introduction of heavy earth-moving equipment into the small-scale sector, they no longer are small-scale miners. They are medium-scale miners, because the destruction one excavator can do in a month is considerable. And so we're going to have small-scale artisanal mining, which is different from medium-scale mining. And so once we categorize them better, then we are able to regulate them in a much better way. Aside from that, we're going to introduce all the technology that is required in order that we reclaim the mined out lands. And already some countries have offered to provide us with the technology and the funding to re-level the lands, clean the water, and plant the trees back on the mined out land. So reclamation is going to be very big. It's going to create employment too, because the young people who have been involved in Galamsey are going to be employed to grow the trees back on the mined out land. And so there's...
Okay, so that was John Dramani Mahama in some of the Tuja when he had an interview speaking about the military takeovers in various West African countries and what he anticipates moving forward. He also touched on Galamsey, the way forward. He's saying, on day one, he's going to ban Galamsey and as a mining for gold in forest. Adia MPP for Alawi, and he's going to backtrack those particular laws. So it is really bright if you look at John Dramani Mahama's future in terms of politics, his aspirations, and what he wants to do in this particular term. We are just hopeful, say, Atiye Emma Omunya refits and a new patriotic party they had. More updates soon.